Hello, it looks like we have some people here. Can I get like a thumbs up or something and like a reaction in the chat if you can hear me right now? Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna wait a little bit longer and see if anybody else jumps on. But thanks for being here. All right, I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, maybe only one. I'm still waiting on Allison Henkin. Yeah, it looks like Allison is on her way. So I'm just gonna wait a couple more minutes. Thank you for being patient. All right. Can I get like a reaction that you can see the template here? Right on. Okay, sweet. For some reason I'm having a tough time kind of seeing what you guys can see, but as long as you guys can see this, we'll get started. Allison will join us in a second. So right now, we're going to start the continuous improvement plan webinar for 2024-25. So my name is Nick Wagner. I have taken over the CIP plans, at least the um, the part of me making sure it's compliant, as well as all your submissions. My title is actually the Rural and Underserved Educator Incentive, the rules coordinator, but I also oversee the Rural and Underserved Educator Incentive Program, which is what I wanted to bring up. That's why I spoke, is because I'm sure you guys have gotten a ton of emails from me about that. So a quick plug there. We're still looking for a lot of applicants for the RU EIP, and I might even actually go over that at the end. Just in case you guys haven't got those emails. It looks like Allison did join us. She is my co-host. She has been doing the CIP forever. I've kind of taken it over, but yeah, she is our K through 12 accountability and project manager, program manager. So she'll jump in if if there's something I missed or something she feels like needs to be said. But yeah, you have an expert with you. And then, yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go over basically the process of the CIPs, as well as how the templates need to be constructed to be compliant. And we'll kind of get into that. And then I'll probably jump onto our website and show you guys some things, but just like how to navigate it, how to find templates, and any resources you might have. And then at the end, we'll just kind of go over a little like how CIP and long-term strategic planning can coexist to just like work together. And that'll be super fast. Okay, so the basics. Continuous improvement plans are always due October 1st. I am a bit of a people pleaser, and if people ask me, I would probably say yes if I could, but I can't. October 1 is a hard deadline. It's in statute. So every year, October 1, 2024, or at least October 1 every year. So 2024 this year, this is when it's due. If there are some things where you're like, I can't find this data, I'm waiting on data or whatever you need, what you'll need to do is kind of just do a watermark of what you have and just put draft on there and then send it to me, and at least I'll have a draft. But something's got to be due October 1 and as much as you possibly can do. Another thing is, although you probably have my like my actual work email, plans@edu.idaho.gov is actually the most beneficial way to reach me or reach me or Allison if you have a question about the plans, because I actually set aside time to review the plans. And if it's all together, it's actually, just much easier rather than me sifting through my own email, trying to find something. I can always go back to the plans mailbox and make sure I can find it there. But if you forget or whatever, it's not a big problem, but it is helpful. The other thing is the CIP, when it's created, when it's compliant, when you get that email, there needs to be a link on your website, on your district's website, to find it. That is also in statute. I kind of want to see if anybody is from the charter school world, but I will still go over this. Just like last year, the charter schools, they had determined the language and interpreted it now that charter schools can submit the performance certificate in lieu of the CIP. And I know that the performance certificates are kind of getting shifted a little bit, and I think they've just been received by all the charter schools. So the performance certificates should all really be together. And the reason why it's interpreted now that it can be in lieu of the CIP is because it has the things that we're looking for in it, at least, and all of that's kind of already been done technically. But I have made a checklist. If there's anybody from the charter school world that has any questions on it, I can even go through it at the end and just kind of like show you the checklist of not only the CIP, but the checklist for the performance certificate, what I'm looking for. That way you know what I'm looking for when I review either performance certificate or CIP. And if you are from the charter school world and you do a CIP and a performance certificate, I'm actually going to check the CIP because you turned it in. If I'm doing it and you're like, oh, never mind, just the performance certificate, that's fine. But if you turn in both, I'm going to review the CIP and give notes and let you know if you're compliant or not. It's nice bullet. The templates and support, yep, they're available on our website. I'm probably just going to go at the end and kind of show you guys through at the end, just because there might be some things we discuss that might also be helpful if we find it on the website. But we're going to do that at the end and I'll show you where to find those things. I think I may have mentioned it before, but the CIPs have not changed as far as like what you are expected to turn in, or at least like what's changed is like if anything's gone or added to the CIP. Nothing's changed from last year. It's the same thing. The only thing that's changed is the dates move over. And that's just kind of just something to mentally know. And good for us, right? So we can stay consistent and nothing's just thrown in there. Once again, it's submitted every year, revised every year. Can't be just like copy and paste. It's got to be something new, at least as far as the targets go and the data in there. And yeah, so this final bullet point here, a lot of you guys might know, but the CIP narrative, which is the first template of the two, is pretty much the simplest one, which is why you can be exempt from turning in the narrative, because if you have already in the previous years already had an exempt narrative approved, or you're requesting that I want to exempt because nothing has changed from last year. And I'll show you what it looks like, but it's basically mission and vision, and then community involvement. So if nothing's changed and all you would have to do is request to have the exemption. I just do a quick check, make sure that last year's was in compliance, and then you guys, it would be approved to be exempt, and you wouldn't have to do that part, and you'd still be in compliance. So I'll kind of show you that now with the CIP narrative Word doc here. So as you can see, I mentioned mission and vision, and then community involvement and plan development. Just before we begin, anything highlighted is going to be required, not just for this document, but also for the template to the metrics document. Anything that's highlighted is just a quick little tip there, that's required. So this right up here, I'll just kind of say this is easy stuff, but a lot of people just kind of skip over it, which is fine. I will know who you are based off of the email you send me. I will say it is kind of helpful to have this filled out, because as you guys know, the superintendents kind of shift, and every year I have to send out a massive email to not just overly superintendents, but anybody who else might work on the CIP with the superintendent. And sometimes, a superintendent retires, and then I have no email to send anybody, and I have to go contact the district. And it's not like crazy hard. It's just like these things kind of help. I'll just put it right into an extra contact. So if you can fill it out, that's great. But once again, the most required things are the things that they required and are highlighted in a color. So like I said, this is super simple. Mission and vision. Generally, this is in your strategic plans. Your district is going to have a mission and vision. You just pop it in there. And the only time I ever have an issue is if somebody just writes a sentence in here. I have to be able to see kind of like a bolded mission and then like a sentence and then vision and then a sentence or sentences. And if I can see it, as long as I can see it, it's good, required and approved and compliant. The community involvement. This one's basically what I'm looking for is how you just interact with your community and how you keep them involved with the plan, with your improvement plan. And that can be like surveys to parents and students or stakeholders, teachers, how you involve them in gathering their information on how to make this better. And it doesn't necessarily have to give me like what information they provide you, but how you do it. Maybe like quarterly, meetings when involving all those people, however you want to do it. But if I can't find a way where there's no community involvement, and I see this like not a ton, and in fact, last year, I think it was one of our best yet of like in compliance and how many or one of our better years. So everybody did great. But sometimes there's just a lot of words in here, and then I just don't see how anybody's interacted with anybody outside there. So as long as there's even a sentence, so sometimes I'll have like 2 pages of something, and I'm like sifting through it, trying to find who you talk to, and then nothing. And then I'll have somebody else will be like 2 sentences of like, or 3 sentences of like how they incorporated the feedback, and then it's fine. And we might see that a little bit later too. So yeah, and honestly, I'm trying to keep. Oh, okay, Allison, you're helping me with the chat. Okay, yeah, jump in anytime you have a question. I know you guys are kind of like just muted and watching, but yeah, send us a message on chat, and hopefully Allison can help you, or just she'll jump on and we can talk through it. Okay, so now we're going to jump to template 2. This is going to deal with the CIP metrics. And these are right before we get into it. We're going to do I just want to give you some tips, I guess. And I probably should actually just show you on the actual template. Let me see if I can pull it up. Okay. Okay, boom. As you can see, actually, can you see? Can you see the metrics? Can I get a thumbs up or something?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, right on. Awesome. Okay, so as you can see, these metrics right here are all in the instructions and examples tab, and sometimes people will actually delete these data points and put in their own. I feel like that's kind of harder on both of us. Just kind of jump over this tab and fill it out here. This instructions examples is actually really helpful. Thanks to Allison, she made this a few years ago. Just every single thing has instructions on how to fill it out. And as well as some examples on how, and even if it's not helpful to you, that's okay. Call me, I can walk you through it. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because there are some people who will switch these out, and I just feel like that's tougher for you. Okay, and then I wanted to show in the links tab, there's a tab here. Okay. So a lot of people for first part, before we get to section 1, same thing, LEA names, that's super helpful for me. But right here, it's a lot of people will just put a link to their district website, and it's actually required that you go to, it is tied to your district report card at the idahoschools.org. And I'll know instantly if it's correct, if it has that, and then /districts, and then /your LEA. But if I see that it's a district web page, I have to send it back. And sometimes it's so, tough because they've done everything correct and wonderful. And then right here, they get this part wrong, and I got to send it back. And it's not, crazy difficult, but it's like, oh man, almost first try now. So just want to throw that out there. And then lastly, I'll jump back here, but I'll talk through it. Is let's get there. Is if you guys want to create your own format, I've shown you kind of the first part of the narrative, and then the metrics, a little bit of the metrics template. You guys can actually do that, and that's totally fine. You would just really need to make sure it's in complete alignment with all the required things. And there are districts that actually will provide their own format and it's kind of probably like intertwined with their strategic plan a little bit. And it works because there's already data in there. But you have to incorporate those extra things like that, just as simple as that link I was talking about. If that's not that, just something that's easily missed in a newly formatted thing. So if you already have something going and that's the way you want to do it, that's totally fine. I just wanted to let you know that, yeah, that's possible. Okay, so we're going to jump into the first section here of the metrics and the template 2. And this one's pretty self-explanatory. These first 2 sections are pretty easy, mostly because they don't require any actual like data from you to input. Now, that doesn't mean you're not looking at actual data to like come up with your target goals, but I feel like it's a little bit more simple than the other tabs because these performance metrics are given to you, and then you're basically taking last year's CIP, which if you guys want your last year's CIP, just email me and I can send it to you. You're just taking this tab of last year, which would be 2023, 24, and then just copy and paste and put it right in these columns right here. And then you already have that complete. And then you're looking at your probably data to figure out the targets for these. But yeah, I feel like these are all pretty self-explanatory. I guess the adequate growth can always be a little tricky, but basically the adequate growth is just a measurement of the like growth indicator of our accountability system, where the students are based on a 3-year trajectory, and each year kind of like looked at what they're progressing at, and then if they are progressing at a rate which would make them to the proficient level, they would be in that adequate growth model. And we can actually go over that at the end in at least a previous data set on how to find those things in the data. I'll have to walk you through it to find in the SDE website. But sometimes that adequate growth can be left blank because that can be hard to find and understand what it is. But once you figure it out, it's pretty simple. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Allison, anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I would be happy to go over, how to figure out whether or not a student makes adequate growth at the end. We actually are proposing a change to our state consolidated plan where we're adjusting how students' targets are created, their growth targets are created, and it actually is a lot simpler than the previous process for creating growth targets. So it will be easier for you to figure out whether or not what a kid's target would be and whether or not they've met it. So I certainly would be happy to walk through that if we have time at the end so that folks can see it. But you also can know that as we get into the 24-25 school year, we're probably through the department going to be sending out additional information about that change so that folks understand what that new growth process is.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Let's do that at the end and yeah, see where we can get. Okay. So moving on to section 3. This section 3 and 4 look very similar, at least in the formatting right here. As you can see, section 3 has to do with the LA measures literacy goals and targets. And this one probably takes a little bit more effort, mostly because what you're doing is you're coming up with your own metric on what you would like to comply for, like these literacy goals and targets. So, and you have to choose one, as you can see here, and it has to be different. And I'll try and go back here. And then it has to be different than these performance metrics here. And I'll actually go over some examples after we go through section 4, so we can kind of go over some examples as well of what is a good performance metric, kind of like what is considered like something that can actually be a yes or no kind of thing. So sometimes people will just put like, I don't know what is, like it's performed like in it doesn't like include maybe like a grade. They'll just say down here it might say like graduate, and it doesn't like explain like who's graduating, like is it an 8th grader like moving on, or what grade is moving on. And then sometimes it does happen. So we'll go over some good examples and some bad examples, but you'll see here that there's a new column, and these are the results. So basically, what you want to do is truly look at your previous year's CIP and see if that you already have a performance metric created. And you'll choose if that's something you want to continue with, but you'll have that performance target from previous year to just put over here, and then be able to put that result there. Now the results need to be there, and I know it says if available. So if they're not available, you need to explain why. And generally it's in this part, section 3B, because you're doing 3A rather than 3B, and you'll put the reason why there. You can also write it right in this little cell here, but there does need to be actual targets for both years and results, or a reason why the results can't be there for each metric that you choose. I suggest that you do 2 metrics, because sometimes one, if you do 2 or 3, maybe one isn't like matching, right? Maybe it's missing something. You still have compliance because you had at least one. I will make a note to you saying like, hey, like this is missing this, but the other 2 are compliant. So you're in compliant if you don't want to change that. But that's why I would suggest like having 2 or 3 performance metrics that you are watching yourself. And the last thing I want to go over is this narrative part. Basically, you get a choice of either doing the section 3A or the section 3B for section 3, and then same for section 4. You can either do one or the other. And this narrative part is really like you're just writing out what you did, and that's or what you'd like to your performance metric to be. With that being said, you still need to have targets for this to be compliant, as well as results or reason why. So the same apply section A as B of like what needs to be there. But sometimes districts do feel it's more necessary to write out their progress or whatever they're doing, because it is a little bit more nuanced than putting it in a specific data measurement. And that goes for section 4 as well. So yes, do we have any questions on this section? Allison, do you want to add anything here? You want to go over some maybe good examples?
Yeah, I think you covered it quite well, but sure, I can give a couple good examples.
Okay.
If you and folks, another thing to note is that there are examples of these in The
Right here.
template. So in the template, the instructions and examples has specific examples. So, you're welcome to look at those there. It can be very helpful in terms of, getting some ideas. One of the ones that's probably the most common is that the third grade ELA ISAT is not a required metric. So because it's not one of the required metrics, it's commonly used by a lot of folks as one of the ways that they can do the piece. And so folks will use that one. Another one is that folks will use fall to spring growth on the IRI, because that's another one that isn't required. So those are really common ones we see. But what I would say is if you're wanting to build one and you're not sure how to build it, you have questions, you can't figure out, you're thinking through the data you have available, please feel free to email or call Nick or I, and we can talk with you through it so that what you end up putting in is workable. One of the main things that I always tell folks that's really, really important is to think about whether or not the metric is written in a way where you can actually answer the question. So you need to be able to have the metric be written specifically enough that you can put a numerical goal on it. And then at the end of the year, you're actually able to figure out how many kids or how many staff met that metric. An example of one that isn't good that I have seen in the past literally would say, for instance, in this college and career advising one, it might say college and career advising professional development. And that would be the metric. The problem with that metric is that my immediate question would be which professional development and for whom? Because you can't answer the question of whether or not enough teachers, for instance, participated in that professional development if your metric isn't specific enough. So that's the main thing that you have to look at when you're writing these. You're also welcome to use the ones you've had in the past. But we know that sometimes when administrations change or plans change within your district that you want to change them, the most important thing is just thinking through how you write them in a way where it's really clear. So if you have questions about that while you're working on it, please feel free to get a hold of us.
Perfect. All right. Okay. And this is the last part of that second tab and the second template is the section 5 reported progress narrative. This one in the past has been left blank. Everybody did a really good job last year of actually including it. I think it's because we changed the color of it. I think it was like just clear last time, and I think that confused everybody. So basically what I'm looking for in this narrative is something that shows your successes from the previous performance targets of last year, and then any challenges, and then anything that has what are you gonna do to change those challenges or overcome those challenges, or what's your plan? And those are the three things I'm looking for. Including data points is actually pretty helpful, but it's not necessary. It's not mandatory, I guess. So at least 3 bullet points or 3 sentences should be in this box of just what's a success, what was the challenge, and what we're doing to improve. And that doesn't have to be for every single target or measure on the previous pages. It can really just be something that you want to reflect on, that you found was the best thing to reflect on, maybe kind of like the highlights of your metrics or your year, I guess. So I'm not looking for everything. I'm really looking for just at least 3 sentences or those 3 things there. Yeah, but like I said, everybody did a really good job last year in completing it. And this section 6 notes is actually I find it really helpful for kind of communication between the districts and myself when I'm checking this, is if there's anything in the previous sections or metrics where you're like, this might be a little confusing, you just write out why, or maybe you might just say NA for some of the metrics because your school doesn't go to grade like doesn't do grade 8 or 6 or something. So it's like you just put an NA there and then explain it here. Now, granted, I could probably go find out why or see in a previous year's CIP, but just having it there is just a quick check. And then it also helps with the performance, teacher performance metrics, which is in the staff performance metrics. I mean, and in the next page here. Before I move on, any questions? I don't see any. Okay, all right. All right, so the CIP metric staff performance report. This one's a little tricky, and I'm going to do my best. Allison, jump in, because this one's a lot, and this one can be really confusing, mostly because I find it confusing just the way it's worded. But ultimately, keep in mind that is a staff performance metric, like your kind of an assessment evaluation of your staff based on the percent of based on like how the students in the subject and the grade in the group did. And I'll explain like how you get that group, but basically it's not an evaluation of the teacher's performance, even though it is like not through their like evaluations, but through the grouping of them as a district by the outcome of the students. And the way we'll kind of walk through this is I kind of like to look at it like starting with the assessment tool. Like every district and school will have a general, like not even a general, sorry, they don't, they're going to have different assessment tools. What we use is the IRI and ISAT, and that's the example I'm kind of going to use. But let's just start, okay, K through 3 grades. Let's say we'll do K through 3, and we'll actually, I'm going to jump over to the, where is this at? There we go. Okay. I'm going to jump over to the examples because I think this is a little easier. So actually, let's just do K. All right. What's happening is you're not measuring every teacher that teaches all K subjects alone. You're grouping them with all the teachers in your district that use the IRI assessment tool that also are in this group. So they all have to be grouped together like this, right? And what you need to do also is make sure that you make sure that you have at least 5 of those teachers which maybe you don't have 5K teachers that teach all subjects using the same assessment tool, but you might have some, right? But let's say for this example, you do have 5 kindergarten teachers that teach all subjects using the IR assessment tool. You're going to be able to, and this example was the students, how they performed on average in that group is going to be kind of what you determine by your performance target. But just like the previous metrics, you're going to take last year's performance targets, so 2023, 24, just put them over here if they're the same, if this grouping is still the same as last year. And it's still like allowable as a group. And you're going to put a performance target. Performance targets are always fine. And let's say there's 5 teachers. Whatever the results are, you can put them in here if there's 5 or more teachers that fit in this group. If there is not, what you want to do, and I think it said here, if it's less, you want to put N size. Because if it's less than 5, then you are actually breaking like data rules, data laws. You can't actually provide it. You can only provide it if you have the grouping of at least 5 teachers or more that fit this group. So you can see there's so many groups that kind of fall into something. So maybe it's K through 3, all subjects. And maybe you're a smaller district that doesn't have any, and you'll want to put something like K through 12 grades, everything, and then assessment tool would be varies because I don't have just one. I have so many different. You can still put a target measure here, and then you put n size for results, and then a new target here. I know that's can be super confusing because there's so many different data points that are asked of you, and like, why is this grouping such an important thing? I'm actually gonna kind of rely on Allison to explain that if you can, and then kind of touch up any parts that I missed.
Sure. Actually, I mean, you described it pretty well. And folks, this is probably one of the most complicated parts. So if you have not done this before, I would strongly recommend that you look at your district's last CIP, really to help kind of guide how was it grouped before. And then if you have any questions, contact either Nick or I, because this is one of the trickier ones. And the reason is because it is looking at the students within the group that's created by whatever teachers you group together, instead of just by individual teacher or by the percentage of teachers who hit their target on their learning plan and their evaluation. Instead of it being that, it's taking that grouping and then twisting it and saying, now how did the students taught by that group of teachers do? So it's a little bit complicated. K through 3 grouped together with the IRI is the most common one that we see, pretty much across the board, is people doing a full K through 3 group and doing IRI, because all K through 3 students have to take the IRI. And by grouping K through 3, you oftentimes will get to that 5 teachers N size. So that one's pretty straightforward. It's typically after the 3rd grade where the data gets more challenging, because you then have to determine, are you going to use ISAT for grades 4 and 5? Are you going to group them together? Are you not going to group them together? If you do use ISAT, are you going to use both ELA and math? Like, how are you going to approach that? And then when you get to middle school and high school, it gets further complicated in that you now have subject-based teachers. So it gets more difficult to put together groups of 5 for middle school and high school if you're a small district. If you're a big district, typically pretty easy to do, but for our smaller districts, especially our small rural, oftentimes what we will see is like a 6 through 12 varies, and then the goal, and then N size or not available on the results, and then next year's goal. And part of the reason we wouldn't necessarily expect you to have results, even if you've crossed over the 5, is that you're probably when you're using more than one assessment tool, you can't easily report the results. So, but that's a good way to address setting the goals and meeting the requirement if you aren't able to break your teachers out into smaller groups. We also recognize that for evaluation purposes, some districts, even medium and large size districts, have goals that are set based on the individual teacher. And even in that case, larger districts can't necessarily create groups of 5 or more beyond K3. And we are looking for, and I think that's really, really important to remind folks, and it says this in the instructions, but I want to remind you that we are not looking for you to create new ways to evaluate teachers. This is supposed to be based on the evaluation that already exists for your teachers. So what you have already decided to evaluate your teachers on is what you should be using to group teachers. And in that case, if you can't group them to groups of 5, you would just give us one line that says, K through 12, as Nick walked you through, or you'll go back to the notes in the metrics tab, and you'll say in the notes in the metrics tab, you might say, we don't have any group, based on the way we create our goals, we don't have any staff groups that reach 5 or more, so we are unable to provide staff performance report data. And then Nick will know that you aren't able to provide the data, and then you get passed through. So there's the 2 ways to sort of address that. And please, if you have any questions, throw them into the Q&A or the chat, because we do know that this can be one of the more challenging parts of the report to fill out on the CIP. I'm not seeing any questions yet, Nick, but if I do, I will happily answer them. So I think you can keep going.
Okay, well, yeah, I think what I'll do from here is maybe just jump over to our website and kind of walk you through how to find things. So right here, as you can see, I was looking up somebody's contact info, but if you go just to the boardofed.idaho.gov, it's got a lot of things going on here, right? There's a lot of things happening at OSB, so it's hard to find things. And I'll be honest, it's hard for me to even find my own programs that I oversee sometimes. So um, if so, to just kind of know where you go for at least the CIPs is you go to the K through 12 education tab right here, kind of hover over it, and then click this district/charter school planning with the little video icon there. And I think that's because we put our webinars up here, but this is going to actually just explain everything that we explained now. Once again, yeah, send any questions. I don't see any in the chat, but send any questions to plans at edu.idaho.gov. This has any updates. I update it every year, and it should be up to date now. Right here, this is where you're probably going to find most of your things, is this templates tab. These templates are up to date. They're going to have everything. You're going to find them here. If you can't find them, you forget and you email me, can you send them to me? Absolutely. Other resources. This is last year's webinar, which will be, taken over by this one once this is over. But it's had all the same information. Like I said, the CIP is not, templates have not changed. So filling them out hasn't changed from last year. The 2024-25 continuous improvement checklist. So this is what I use to make sure you're compliant when you turn in the CIPs. So it's probably a good idea to just like check it out and see what I'm looking at. And actually, might as well just look at it now. It kind of just looks like this. And I know it's probably hard to see, but yeah, I go through and I go through the narrative part and I go through section by section. Is it compliant? If not, I write notes all the way through to the end, including the CIP, staff performance right here. So that's just a quick look at the checklist, but it's probably a good idea. So that way, when you finish yours, you want to just line it up, we can do that. And then the CIP staff performance, this is just another notes on how to get that if you forget. Academic growth indicator, we talked about that if you need a description. And then this is for, actually, this one is for the performance certificate checklist right here for any charters. Let's see. These are templates for other plans. I actually don't oversee these anymore. So, or I've never actually done that. So I think Allison may have. Allison, for the literacy intervention program plan, sometimes we get questions on these. Are they required?
So the literacy intervention program plan is still required to be maintained locally, but it does not have to be submitted. So we provide the templates simply for use if your district is wanting to update and change your literacy intervention program plan and you are wanting to use a clean template as opposed to changing your existing one. We keep templates up there available for your use if you want to do that. The college and career advising and mentoring plan is fully optional. It's no longer required to be created by law. So not only do you not have to submit it, you don't have to create it, but we know that a lot of districts are still maintaining them. And so because of that, we keep those templates on our website, again, in case you're doing an update and you want to be able to access those templates and use those. So that's what those are there for, really just a resource for districts.
Perfect. All right. And then the next thing we'll do, Alice, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to the SD website and then kind of show them how to navigate to that
The data page.
The data page. And then
Perfect.
we can just kind of work through that together. So I clicked on this Idaho reading indicator because I know it takes me to the SD website, which I just click on this to take me back to the homepage here. So DSD.gov. You guys are well aware of it. And you're just at the homepage here. You scroll down to this board here, and you're just going to click on this top middle one, assessment and accountability. And then you're going to scroll down again and click on this accountability tab, this orange one. And when you're here, you're under files, resource files, and it's actually located in results underlying the report card. And right now we have 2021, 22 report card data, and then we have this report card data here, which we don't have the 23, 24. Allison, do we know when that's coming?
I've been told that we anticipate releasing the ISAT data in mid to late August. But there will be some other pieces of data that will be a little bit delayed, but I think that both ISAT and IRI will be coming out at that point. Also note, I know Jan, you asked about the graduation rate data. It's just up a few from that. So the results underlying the report card includes most of the data, but the graduation rate data is separate, and that's where that is. And so just a note that because of the timing of graduation rates, those are always delayed by 1 year. So your most recent sort of data that we would expect you to look at and consider in terms of creating your graduation rate would be looking at the 22-23 cohort class. That class of 23 would be your most recent, because you're actually creating a goal for the class of 2024. Because even though the class of 2024 is essentially done, those students go into their graduation rate even if they did summer school. So some of those students are still finishing. And then of course we have the appeals process. And so the 24 cohort graduation rate won't be finalized until the spring. So that's why that is the goal you're setting, is for the class of 2024. So that's where that data is. And then the data underlying the report card is where you'll find all of the ISAT data, including the growth data. For the growth data, it's literally called ELA growth and math growth. The past data is in that file. So ISAT's in there, IRI is in there, growth is in there. And just a reminder that when you're filling out the template, in most cases, you are not required to put in any of that past data. You're just looking at it to help you create your next year's goals. Because what the template usually requires is just last year's goals and this year's goals. So that is another thing to make note of.
Right on. Do you want to maybe go through like an example?
Yeah, can you zoom in a little bit? It's teensy tiny right now.
That is true. Sorry. Okay.
Perfect. So in this particular case, one of the things that I would do, right, is those lovely little buttons are to filter. And so one of the first things I would do is I'd go over to student group and I would change it to all students. Because in this particular case, that's what you're going to be after, is the all students group for any given grade. But you can also see the all students is going to get you all. But another thing that you can do here is in that same place, you can get rid of all, you can scroll down and you can choose a specific grade. So if I'm wanting to look at grade 6 ISAT math, I would choose grade 6, hit OK. And then you can see if I'm wanting to look at ISAT math, I then have to go over to the metric ID. Keep going over to the right. Yep, right there, metric ID. And that's where I would say, okay, I want ELA proficiency. That would be the ISAT ELA proficiency for 6th grade. And then it's going to pull that up and I'm going to be able to look through. This is got by school, by district. In that case, right, you really only need district. And so I would get rid of, everything and just choose the district as opposed to a school. So say Aberdeen, yep. And you're just going to keep, so there you could see, right? It's probably N-sized because we chose Aberdeen. So that's not the best choice. Sorry about that, folks. But you can definitely see here, right there. Oh, it's not N-sized. So that's great. So the value is 50%. So their ELA proficiency for 6th grade is 50% for that year. You also, in that same place of metric ID, you could change that over to ELA growth. And then in what it's telling you is the percentage of students who met adequate growth. So that's what that value is when you change it over to ELA growth. And so you can use that to filter through your data and pull up your 4th and 6th and 8th grade growth data from whatever year. This is the example for 22-23. As Nick mentioned, the 23-24 data is not out yet. So we will send an email when it's out. But we are anticipating most of it will be released later in the month in August or in very early September. Questions about that before we walk through the new growth model?
Looks like we're good. Okay. So Allison, is there some where you want me to go for the growth model?
Yeah, what I'll do is actually I'll share my screen and then we can come back for the last 2 slides on yours.
Yeah.
Does that sound good?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to stop share.
Okay, folks. So the proposed model for how we're going to set trajectory growth targets for students is based on their prior performance. So we grouped students into 3 different groups, and then each of them has a slightly different goal set based on how they performed in the prior year. So if I'm looking at, say, identifying what a student's goal is going to be, and I can literally look at an individual student and say, what's this kid's goal going to be for the 24-25 school year for the ISAT? These are all ISAT growth targets. We have not done a model yet for IRI. For ISAT, if a student performed in a certain category in the 24 testing, then I can very easily say, what is their goal for 25? So if a student was below proficient, that is that they were in level 1 below basic or level 2 basic in 2023, their 24 growth target is to move from one subcategory up to the next subcategory. We are working currently on setting these cut lines for 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C. As soon as we have those cuts identified at what scale score they're at per grade, we will send those out and put them up on the State Department's website so that you can see those. And then you'll very easily be able to say, okay, this student was in the 1A category in 2023. Now they need to fall into this range, which is the 1B category for their next grade. That's where they need to be next year. And it's a 1-year target only. It's not, the previous version looked out 3 years. Instead, now we're saying each year, a student who is below basic needs to move up 1 subcategory per year. That is the goal. And it resets every year. So if a student doesn't make their target, they would have the same target the following year. That is what the proposed model is for students who are not proficient. And I should say, this model has already been approved by the board and is in a consolidated state plan amendment that we are sending to the U.S. Department of Education. And we're just waiting for their final approval, but we do not anticipate any issue because states are allowed to set our own growth models. So there really should be no problem in terms of getting this approved. So we fully anticipate this going into place in the 24-25 school year. For students who have scored proficient, specifically level 3 proficient, the goal is to maintain their subcategory or move up in the next year. So if a student's proficiency score for 4th grade, when you look at the scale score ranges, would have fallen into 3B, then their goal for 5th grade is to stay in 3B or move up, just not to fall back to 3A. That would be the goal for a student who scored proficient. You would figure out which subcategory they're in, and then the goal is for them to at least maintain that subcategory. This is in recognition that when a student has reached proficiency, they're doing well. And so that's why we're not requiring them to move up a subcategory. But at the same time, we know from our data that some students start to slide back. And we want to make sure that a student is continuing to grow academically, and that if they're sliding backwards, they're not considered having met their growth target. So that's the reason that this was set up that way. The final grouping is students who hit level 4 advanced. There is no subcategories in level 4 advanced in the proposed model because we recognize that a student who hits advanced is doing very well, and that anywhere in that advanced category means you are doing very well. So even if you slide backwards within the level 4 advanced category, as long as you stay above that level 4 cut, you are considered having met growth for the year. If at some point a student slides out of the level 4 category back down into the proficient level 3 category, then they are then not considered meeting their growth target. That is the new growth model. Are there any questions about the growth model?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay, so there will be more information coming out about the growth model. As I mentioned, especially once we're in that process of finalizing those subcategory cuts for levels 1, 2, and 3. Once we have those subcategory cuts identified, we will be sending out more information to districts and having it posted on the department's website so that you can take a look and get to better understand that model. If at any point you have questions, please feel free to contact me. I was one of the key staff members who worked with our accountability oversight committee and our department staff to create this model. So I've been pretty deep into it for the last year. So certainly if you have questions, I can probably help you figure it out. So feel free to reach out if you are trying to understand the new model and you're having any challenges with that. Please feel free to email or call me.
Okay, I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. And we're just going to go through these slides pretty quick. You guys did the strategic planning and the CIPs. Obviously, the differences with the CIP, you're focused on an annual performance targets, specific measurements, the long-term strategic plans, their goals, systematic adjustments, and then improving performance. Obviously, they're important because you have so much ownership in it with stakeholders and so many people. A lot of focused efforts from many different people, and there's a lot more you can accomplish. Obviously, a lot bigger goals, and then it just provides a lot of success to everyone, students, teachers, and administrators. The strategic plan and the CIP, basically, what can be done is by now a lot of the CIP metrics are specific, but you can create your own, and you can have them even targeted, adjusted to that strategic plan to align and hopefully be a little bit more focused on 1 year, one metric. This is what we're going to do that also helps our strategic plan by meeting those goals and setting those goals with your strategic plan and the CPO as well. So it's kind of like looking at it like, does the plan should focus, become a center of your work as a team. And it's basically looking at your 5-year strategic plan is kind of like a 5 1 years, where that is what your CIP already is. It's already a 1 year every time. So like I said, this is pretty self-explanatory, but if you are able to match these metrics together and manipulate them to your strategic plan, it is beneficial to your stakeholders, your teachers, your students, and you. And then these last parts is yeah, I mean, you guys are evaluated based on your part of your CIP, and some of that feedback comes your way. So it does it does help you. You can use it to your benefit. And yeah, Allison, is there anything, you know, you want to add to this?
Sure. I think the main thing that we want to help you think about here is how can you connect any of the plans that you're required to have or do have, even though it's not required. So long-term strategic plans are not required, but most districts have them. So making those connections between your annual CIP and your long-term strategic plan and using as many of the CIP metrics to gauge your strategic plan is wise, because then things are connected and it will help you to move things forward. Similarly, if one of your schools has a school improvement plan, when you're building that school improvement plan, connecting the metrics in the school improvement plan to your CIP metrics is another way in which you can build a straight line between different pieces of the work that's happening in your district that will make sense and help you to move progress forward consistently. So similarly, I know there's Title I plans. That's another area where you can really try to look at which of the CIP metrics could be used in a Title I plan. So really what we're encouraging you to do is to think through how you can connect your plans and your work together so that you are then having all of your internal stakeholders within your district pulling in the same direction. And if you ever have questions about that or questions about how to use your data for strategic planning, please feel welcome to reach out to me. That is sort of one of my areas is use of data. So please feel welcome to reach out and ask questions or to chat through ideas of what I've seen with other districts to help you to build the right connections in your own district.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
I don't either. So folks, if you have any questions, make sure to put them in the chat or the Q&A right now so that we don't sign off without answering your question.
Well, with that, here is our contact information. You guys are welcome to reach out to us. If it is specific about templates and procedure and being in compliance, please, plans, always. I oversee the plans mailbox. And if it does, you know, it is a bit of a more Allison question with data and especially aligning strategic plans as well. I will just forward it to her. So, and it'll have the plans on there. So, but it'll always get to us. I think I keep hitting home this plan because I think it'll just get done faster. But thank you guys, and I don't see any questions, so we'll leave it at that. And yeah, have a good day.
Thank you all.